Good morning, everybody. We have a great episode of GoJo and Golic coming your way today. I hope you don't have a Halloween hangover, but if you do, out of the darkness into the, kind of darkness, I don't know. The Jets got the win last night, so we'll talk about how they made that happen. Plus, we will talk college football. There's a top 5 matchup that has a lot of playoff implications, so we'll talk about the whole Saturday football slate. Plus, Halloween grades. Come on, yesterday was Halloween. We got to talk about what the athletes wore, what the stars wore. We will get into all of that today on GoJo and Golic.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Jesse Cofield. We got a great show. We are presented, as always, by Campbell's Chunky, the soup that eats like a meal. If you got to check us out every Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and all those great places. Fun one coming up today. Heather Dinich going to stop by and talk to us about the impending college football playoff rankings coming out next week, how that's going to inform some of the rivalries that we're going to see this weekend, Ohio State, Penn State, and a big, big slate in the sport. But, Dad, Jesse mentioned two very important things. One is the New York Jets getting a win in a football game, which hadn't happened in 5 football games. It was starting to get pretty dire around there, and they kind of needed this one. The other is the Halloween hangover, which you and I are not experiencing right now in any way, shape, or form. A holiday that we talked about yesterday is famed for the kind of candy that we love to eat, and neither of us, it sounds like, I know for me, went trick-or-treating last night, got the experience and the feeling, realizing that, oh my God, it really is all people my age that are the parents now out trick-or-treating, because all the costumes are stuff that was popular when I was a kid. It's parents dressed up as Power Rangers, as Pokemon, as all these different things that, unless they're going as TV characters, the stuff that their kids like is stuff germane to when we were kids, and everyone doing it with a wine tumbler in hand, because you can't not be a little buzzed while you're going out here and hearing all these kids scream for candy. But I didn't have a ton of candy along the way throughout this process. Didn't hand any out of the door because kids don't come to my neighborhood. And so I don't know if it was the same for you, Dad, but I am feeling a decided lack of that sugar low on the back end of Halloween.
It's like you go out and you don't drink. You pay for it the next day with a hangover, but you had a good time. So I always expect the sugar hangover after Halloween, because you hand out candy, you give candy to kids, you eat a piece. You give candy to kids, you eat a piece. Before you know it, you've had 40 pieces of candy. And you sleep like garbage, and you wake up and you feel like garbage the next day, but you realize you ate a bunch of candy, so you're happy. So your mother and I came back to Arizona like 2 weeks earlier than we normally do. We normally spend Halloween at Notre Dame, and we live right off campus in a neighborhood that is just stocked. The kids that come around, we get a lot of candy, the big bars, by the way, and we use it all. Last year, there was a freaking blizzard, and I'm not just exaggerating. There was a whiteout blizzard at Notre Dame, and the kids were still out. The kids still took all the candy. Here, we're kind of in a snowbird neighborhood, and not a lot of people are back yet because we're back earlier than normal. So there was nobody. Nobody was out. I had zero. We bought zero candy to hand out, and I had 0 pieces of candy. we took your niece Alex out to the train park out here. She was dressed as a bird. It was very, very cute. And we rode the train in the train park and stuff like that. But that was it. She's young, too young. She's almost going to be 1, so she's not into candy yet. She will be. We'll get her on that.
Yeah.
So, it was a decidedly no candy Halloween, which is very un-Golic-like. Now, Jake, Jenny, and Jackson, they had it going on in Boston. Jackson's 2. He was into it. He was an astronaut. He was going out. They had a bunch of candy. So they were living the life last night.
There's nothing cooler than when the light starts to go on for a kid who realizes, wait, you mean tonight I just get to go around to all these houses and they have to give me candy. So we got to experience that at some point. Jesse, you didn't get any of that at all last night either. Sounds like you were on sick kid duty.
Yeah, so my husband's sister came over and we had dinner and we got the kids in the costumes and we went out to take them trick-or-treating and we got them in the wagon and we're pulling them down the street and there's a neighborhood kind of across a road from our neighborhood that is the neighborhood to go trick-or-treating in. So we're heading over and my son, my little 8-month-old son, just burst into tears and he was not happy. So mom had to take the baby, turn around, go home, put the baby to bed, and I did not get to participate in trick-or-treating. But my husband did take a lot of video, and when my daughter got home, I could tell that she'd had a lot of candy, okay? By what I mean is, I don't know if you've ever conversed with a 2-year-old, but they start to do this thing where they can't shift. It's like a car shifting. They can't get into the next gear. She was just repeating words. She was like, I want. And I was like, oh my God. So bedtime took about an hour and a half, but she had a great time. It was worth it.
That's a successful Halloween.
Yeah.
That's successful.
Yeah.
I mean, so now do you save the candy? Do you let her eat some and put some away? Do you take a candy tax as a parent because you went out with your kid? I mean, how does it work?
So what I did growing up was our parents used to say, you can keep the candy if you want, or you can, the next day, you can turn in all your candy and get something you really want. So they used to bribe us. They'd be like, if you turn in all your candy, we'll get you this thing that you really want.
Okay.
And it was that usually worked for us. One year I got a cat, a real live cat. So that was pretty
Very
sick.
on theme for Halloween, too.
Yeah. So
Yes.
with Vivian, though, she's so little. She trick-or-treated for 20 minutes. And so she only had 8 little pieces of candy. She ate probably most of them. So there's 4 pieces of candy left. So I'm just going to let her have them. But as years go on, I'll probably adopt the bribery method that my parents used.
Interesting bribery system. My fat ass would have just been like, no, I'll keep the candy, please, and thank you. You can keep your gifts and riches. But to each their own, and it's an exciting decision that they get to make. So, you know what? A middling Halloween for all of us, which makes sense given the places that we're at in life here. And it was sort of a middling Thursday night football game for a long time, Dad. The first half of this game, about as ugly as it gets between the Malachi Corley fumble out of the end zone, Aaron Rodgers passing for only 32 yards in the first half of a game before going on to 3 touchdown drives in the second half that ultimately slammed the door shut in this one. The Jets get the win on Thursday Night Football against the Texans, 21-13. They sack C.J. Stroud 8 times in this game. And, Dad, we talked about it. The protection issues that had plagued this Texans team came back to bite them. But what did you see from the Jets that they found that maybe can spark a better second half of the season for them?
Well, I mean, listen, if we talk about pair of wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in Philadelphia, Puka and Cooper with the Rams. You talk about, a pair of wide receivers. Well, of the 22 completions that Aaron Rodgers had, you mentioned he was 7 of 14 for 32 yards in the first half and 15 of 18 in the second half. So 22 completions, 16 of those went to Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. 9 to Garrett Wilson and 7 to Adams. So that's it. It took a bit. But that's going to be the magic elixir. Obviously, you try and run the ball as well with Breece Hall. They had basically just 100 yards rushing, but it was just under 5 yards per carry. So have they found the magic elixir? I don't know. You know, that they're I don't think they're going to catch Buffalo, but obviously they're just looking to get into the playoffs. Listen, they broke a 5-game losing streak and they beat a team that's not playing well right now. So let's see about consistency, right? The defense for the Jets is still giving up too much on the ground. Now, they sacked the hell out of the quarterback, 8 sacks, and Houston has been sacked the second most in the league, 31 times. 30 times Stroud has been sacked, but 31 times total. They're second in the most sacks given up to the Giants, but they did rush for 187 yards. So the Jets' rush defense, had some holes in it without question. But I'm not going to sit here and say the Jets are fixed, but we are. It is kind of a head scratcher at the talent that they have, that they're not playing better than they are. That the offense, had to really push it in the second half just to get 21 points. When you get to and when I say the bigger boys, Houston is kind of falling out of that a little bit.
Yeah.
They now they're leading their division. I give them that. They're leading their division, but they certainly don't look like the Houston of last year. So when I say the bigger boys of the AFC, that's basically, you're talking about Baltimore, you're talking about Kansas City. Those are really, the teams in the AFC. So I don't think the Jets offensively can compete, but it's a long season and they're growing week to week, especially with that duo at wide receiver.
Yeah, I guess that's ultimately it, right? It's the Jets. It's the same story. They've been close to some of these other games, and in this one, they made enough big plays from those talented wide receivers. You had the nice slot fade to Devontae Adams in the second half for the touchdown there. You had the Garrett Wilson touchdown play in the back of the end zone that looked like the Jumpman logo originally, was not called a touchdown on the field, and then went reviewed, and they said his shin hit in bounds. And, Dad, that was one of those plays, rule of cool, I wanted it to stand, because what an incredibly athletically gifted play by one of the better young wide receivers in the NFL. But we saw this come up in another way with the Steelers, and I believe it was George Pickens in the back of the end zone, where we know in college you get 1 foot down, it's a touchdown. In the NFL, you need to get 2 feet down in the end zone. And sometimes that can be 1 foot taps and then the other taps before it goes out of bounds. In this case, I have questions about if his shin really hit in bounds before the knee hit simultaneously out of bounds, but there was no questioning that his left foot tapped once and then tapped again. And, Dad, that's the same thing that happened for Pickens. I am a firm believer that 2 times with 1 foot should equal 2 feet in the NFL.
Agreed.
I don't know how we're making that arbitrary distinction where if 1 foot were to hit and then the other were to drag down in the same time, you get credit for that, but not in this case. It's ridiculous.
And it was George Pickens, wasn't it? Who
it was
tapped
Pickens.
tapped his foot twice. I think that's harder than your shin being down first. Your shin is just naturally falling. Listen, it was a great catch. It was an Odell Beckham-like catch without a doubt. It was a phenomenal catch. And his shin naturally lays down before the knee. I do see in review the shin on the ground before the knee hits out of bounds. So I get it. And I'm with you. I'm happy that was a touchdown. That one, that one needed to be a touchdown. And luckily it was. But I agree with you. I think tapping 2 feet is harder than getting 2 feet in bounds, right and the left, tapping the same foot twice. They're not going to change the rule. I'd love them to change the rule because now we've kind of seen it a couple of times. But that was what a catch. And what a spark for the offense, right? That was 3rd and 19 with 13, 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and they're down 10-7. And as Aaron Rodgers said after the game, he just waited to see if the safety dropped. He was just going, I'm just going to lob it up there. He goes, I didn't really do a whole lot. It was Garrett Wilson that did all the work, but it was a spark for the first 3 drives of the second half. It was incredible. The drives in the second half, again, short passes have been the way with Aaron Rodgers, though he had the deep one, obviously, to Garrett Wilson, and then to close out the deal, the one to Devontae Adams, when they were just trying to keep the ball going for it on 4th down and keep the clock running. They hit a wide open Devontae Adams.
Yeah, that was a great play by him. And, Dad, this was a game, you're right. Ultimately, it was the same formula for the Jets, and they still had plenty of chances to lose this one at the end. The defense just really wouldn't let them. And the thing that'd be concerning if I was a Jets fan was still some of the same mistakes that have plagued you in being a sloppy football team between what you had with Malachi Corley at the beginning, where, again, I didn't think we'd pay homage to Odell Beckham Jr. and Deshaun Jackson in the same night, but he gets the reverse, that he drops into the end zone for a touchback like we've seen plenty of receivers do over the years, celebrating too early. But then, Dad, late in the game, it's 14-10, the Jets are up. The Houston Texans are driving. They get stopped and held to a field goal try. Kaimi Fairbairn makes the field goal, and then the Jets rough the snapper and give them an automatic first down. And so you're thinking, here we go again. Same old Jets continuing to make mistakes. This is just a game where the defense wasn't going to let them lose, and ultimately, they extend that drive. The Jets defense, I think it was Michael Clemens, gets a sack that drops them way back, and they attempt another field goal after that, and this time banging off the uprights. So you had a thing where it looked like the swing that was going to take them from 3-7, and it ends up going from 3-0, and the Jets go down and score another touchdown, make it 21-10, and now all of a sudden put the game what feels like out of reach given the rock fight that this game was. So it was a massive swing. It was the defense setting up, but, Dad, it was still a game marred by Jets' mistakes in critical spots that could have and should have cost them the game.
Yeah, and I tell you, you gotta look over at the Houston side. Houston, we thought was leaders of a mediocre division, but sitting at 6-2. But we still kind of had questions about how they were playing, and now we have huge questions. We had questions about that offensive line. I mean, they cannot protect C.J. Stroud at all. Joe Mixon, 4 games in a row, over 100 yards. He's running the ball well. They may have to just completely lean on the run because Stroud in his last 3 games has thrown 1 touchdown in the last 3 games. So this offense, I know they've lost 2, obviously, receivers in Diggs and Nico Collins. It's hopefully get Nico Collins back next week. But Tank Dell had himself a night for sure, 6 catches for 126 yards. But they just don't have the firepower on offense, even though they have a running back who's gone for over 104 times. Tank Dell's doing well, but C.J. Stroud, I mean, my God, he has no time to throw the ball. They have to throw short because that pocket just absolutely just disintegrates on him.
11 for 30 for 191 yards for one of the better young quarterbacks in the NFL. Dad, they caught them the Jets being caught them at a really interesting time because coming off of that Stephon Diggs injury, knowing Nico Collins isn't yet back, you're retooling that offense in a way they just haven't had to do in a while. Even going back to last year, you had the injury to Tank Dell, but you still had Nico there as that alpha receiver in the room. But you're right, the drop-off in offensive line play year to year for this team is the story. Having Nico Collins back is going to help in giving them a target, but there's just no safe harbor on that offensive line up front. Even the guys on the edge, Laramie Tunsil, who's been great in the past, isn't a guy they can count on as much anymore. And so when you don't have one guy at the very least playing at a good to elite level where you know he can lock it down so you can send the slide to the other side, put more resources those other ways, it complicates the picture. And now CJ Stroud, he's got to wonder where the pressure's coming from every time because it's pretty varied. Interior, on the edge. And if they can't find solutions for that, Dad, I don't even know how much Nico Collins coming back can save them from falling short of their ultimate goal. Like you said, you could still win the AFC South. That's not really in question considering what we've seen from this division, but they had a lot bigger goals from that right now seem way out of reach.
Yeah, been there, done that last year, right? Won the division, but the goal is to then take a next step. I mean, CJ Stroud was sacked 8 times, hit 11 times, and the Jets had 10 tackles for loss. I mean, they were living on the other side of the line of scrimmage. And, now the Texans get some extra days off. But next up are the Lions. So, I mean, try and keep up with that offense. Now, the Lions don't have the pass rushing that they have without Aiden Hutchinson. But still, the Houston Texans need this extra time to kind of figure out what the hell's going wrong.
Yeah, if I'm a team with issues along the lines of scrimmage, I understand Aiden Hutchinson's there. I still do not want to see the Detroit Lions rolling into town because I promise you they've got that on lock. So we'll look at the Detroit Lions and plenty of other NFL teams coming up next as we do our acrostic NFL weekend preview here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here with you guys. It's Friday, which means it's time for the much anticipated acrostic. Okay, fellas, let's get into it. G is for getting rest for a hurt MVP back. O is for old timer who is back to leading his own pack. L is for a legendary rivalry renewed. I is for insight on a ligament that is new. C is for catching snaps. Tua, please don't be rude. And now for the Week 9 thoughts that can set a Sunday mood. Okay.
Wow.
Let's go. Yes, snaps. Great job.
Yep. Back at it. Shout out to Yates on
Uh-huh.
that one. Did a phenomenal job picking up the acrostic this season. And those rhymes, Dad, leading us into a hell of a weekend. And Jesse started it off, the G here, getting the hurt MVP back. This has been interesting to monitor all week. This Broncos-Ravens matchup is very exciting to think about going into this weekend. You've got a Broncos defense that's totally reversed the narrative on last year, getting set to face one of the most dynamic offenses in the NFL in the Baltimore Ravens. But Wednesday and Thursday, Lamar Jackson absent from practice dealing with knee and back injuries. John Harbaugh has called this rest for their MVP, but Dad, hearing Adam Schefter talk about this, if all of a sudden he's absent from practice again today on Friday, this is going to raise some eyebrows. How concerned are you about Lamar's availability for this game?
Yeah, I mean, now normally, you rest guys that have been in the league for a while, but he's nicked up as well. And I think the thing with him and I don't worry about the resting, and I know running is part of the offense, but you have Derrick Henry to pick up the slack. He can still be, if you don't want to run him as much, he can be used as a decoy to run. He still is going to have the threat of running. And if he doesn't run as much, there's still the threat of him taking off. He's still, whether it's a quarterback power where you know he's going to run or a scramble out of the pocket, it's still going to be the threat. You're still going to freeze a safety or freeze a linebacker in coverage when he is running. So I don't really worry. In all honesty, I think he's going to be fine. I think he can be fine missing practice. He knows this offense well enough. He's been in the league long enough where he can go about missing practice and still being a viable option in the game. So I just think it's an unbelievably tough test against a Denver team that is playing well, especially on the defensive side. We don't talk about Denver's defense enough. They are third in the league overall. They are fourth against the pass. And as far as the offensive side, now, Bo Nix has not been lighting up the passing, but we know Baltimore is 32nd against the pass. Baltimore's given up 291 yards a game through the air, and usually they're big chunk plays. I mean, they just, Mike, have not figured that out. They play tough, and then they give up a big toss, and they give up a lot of yards, and it just takes the air out of their sails.
Yeah, Denver and Bo Nix, bottom half of the league in terms of EPA per pass on deep passes of 20 or more yards here. But, Dad, I heard Mina Kimes brought this up yesterday, listening to her podcast, about the job Baltimore's done up front pressuring. They're 25th in quarterback pressure percentage so far on this season. And you know how tied in that back end of the defense and the pass rush are. Last year, Baltimore, because of all those simulated pressures, because of the buttons that Mike McDonald was pushing on defense, that group was one of the best in the NFL at harassing opposing quarterbacks. And so now we talked about the Houston Texans last night, the offensive line, a real big story last year, taking a step back. This Baltimore Ravens pass rush is kind of in that same mode now. So I don't know if they make a move before the trade deadline or not, but that's going to give Bo Nix, if not now, then when. If you're going to be a guy that's anything productive in the deep passing game, it's going to have to be in this game. That being said, Dad, the other side is where I have my worry, because you mentioned Denver's defense is the identity of this team right now. When you look at the opposing offenses they've faced in terms of EPA per play, I think they've only faced one top 10 offense so far this season, and that was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who very different styles. Like, you go back and watch, this Denver Broncos team lost to a Los Angeles Chargers team playing Harbaugh ball, running the personnel groups that you're going to see from Jim and John Harbaugh, multiple tight ends, multiple running backs, fullback usage there. And the key in my mind in this one, Dad, I think Baltimore's going to win this game. I think the number one offense in so many categories, especially rushing the ball, that's getting more in the passing attack from their tight ends. But I think the big key is third down. The Broncos have forced more passing attempts on 3rd and 7+ than any defense in the NFL. They're winning the early downs, and I think that's where Baltimore is going to have to go and be hyper-aggressive with this incredibly dynamic running game.
Yeah, Lamar throwing to wide open receivers, which is more than 5 yards of separation, leads the league with 852 yards and 6 touchdowns. I just don't think he's going to get that separation from the wide receivers in this game. You know, I don't think they can rely on that, especially like you said, when Denver gets you in a 3rd and long. It's a tough position to be in. I think they're going to have to lean on the run in this game and control the clock.
So Baltimore giving 8 in this game, Dad. Where are you on that? Baltimore or the Broncos +8?
That's a little too much for. I'm going to give the Denver Bronco the benefit of the doubt. I guess maybe being a former defensive guy. I think the Ravens win, but I'm not giving 8.
I'll take the Ravens and I'll give the points on this one. I just don't think Bo Nix is ready for this step up in competition. Obviously, that's contingent on Lamar Jackson's got to play for that to be true. So viewer discretion advised. Jesse, let's move on to the O here. Old man Flacco back in the building.
Yeah, cool Joe. He's back, ready to start for the rest of the season, maybe? We don't know. Is he ready to face Brian Flores, though? Chaotic week. We got our definitely not Ginger Sam Darnold. What do you guys think?
So, Dad, the big key for this one is how's he going to do against the blitz? And the answer so far this season has been better than Anthony Richardson. Joe Flacco, 50% completion for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns against the blitz. Anthony Richardson had been just 9 of 34. So that's where you usually see the veteran presence the most, Dad, is poised under pressure like that, especially an athletically gifted quarterback like Anthony. Usually they're going to use their legs to get out of it a little bit more than an older player who's seen a little bit more, who might be able to read and dissect. But that being said, Josh Downs, if you've got receiving total and overs that you want to hit for him, I think it's 5.5 catches around 65 or 58 yards, something in that range. I can look up here. I would take him because when Joe Flacco's in the game, he's getting won the ball. That being said, I think this is a good get-right spot for Minnesota, who we know lost Christian Darrisaw for the year at left tackle. That's going to be a big one to monitor as they made the trade for Cam Robinson this last week. But I still think the Vikings' deep passing attack against this Colts defense is going to be more than enough, and I do think that Vikings defense is overwhelming against the Colts offense now that changes drastically, especially in the run game, not having that quarterback to threaten them.
Well, Jonathan Taylor was back last week after missing the 3 previous games. He is averaging over 90 yards a game on the ground, which has been good. But you mentioned the blitz. The Minnesota's blitzing at the second highest rate in the league, and that's not shocking with Flores. But with the blitz comes 26 unblocked pressures and 6 unblocked sacks. Now, that for unblocked is going to be difficult for Joe Flacco. You have running court like Anthony Richardson. This is where you would like him because he could outmaneuver an unblocked rusher. Joe Flacco is not. He's going to have to get rid of the ball, whether he has to lay it up to Josh Downs or Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is averaging 24 yards of reception, so maybe he just lays it up to him. And then I'm with you on the offense, as far as Sam Darnold, lay it up there. This may be a deep ball passing game. Justin Jefferson, it's a 505 receiving yards on passes over 10 air yards, so leads the league in that. So this may be deep ball heaven for this. So 2 good running backs, obviously, in Taylor and in Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones a little bit nicked up. And Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle out for Minnesota, got hurt in last week's game. So that's been an O-line that has played the 3rd most snaps together, over 91% of the snaps together, now missing their best tackle. I'm calling this game, so I can't pick this game, but I'm hoping it's a good one.
Yeah, I will pick this one for you then and say I think the Vikings get back on track here. I like the Vikings in this one. They are 5-point favorites at home against the Colts, and I think that'll be enough. I think they can get that done by the touchdown and cover that 5-point mark. Jesse, let's get to the L here. I did not realize how deep this rivalry went, but how deep this series went.
Yeah, the longest running rivalry in league history is the Bears and Cardinals. Had no idea. Who do you think has the edge in this one? 2, 4, and 3 teams with something to prove here. Cardinals favored by just 1.5.
Yeah, Dad, this one's interesting here now. The Cardinals are home favorites of 1.5 here. So stinky one. Kyler Murray's been playing some really good football, especially coming off last week's game. And the Bears, we know that loss in the 1-2 matchup against the other top pick in Jaden Daniels. I trust Kyler Murray more in this one at this point, Dad, especially the way he's come back and played this season. What about you?
Oh, I definitely trust Kyler Murray more. Caleb is kind of a hold your breath question mark, especially when he escapes the pocket on what he's going to do. But the one side of the ball I do trust, but I do trust the Bears defense more than the Arizona defense. That's for sure. But Arizona got it going on. James Conner's running the ball hard. I mean, the older running backs have had a renaissance, right? With Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, James Conner, Joe Mixon. And Marvin Harrison Jr. is really stepping up. Trey McBride is doing his thing. And Kyler Murray can run as a dangerous runner. So I trust Kyler more. And I'm going with Arizona. And it's amazing. Arizona's 4-4 and tied for first in their division. The Bears are 4-3 and last in their division. That's wild.
Yeah, it goes to show you what a wild scene the NFC West is. The Cardinals defense, not a juggernaut by any means for Caleb Williams, but the Cardinals utilize zone one of the highest percentage on their dropbacks of anyone in the NFL, almost 70%, have used zone on 69% of their dropbacks this season, which is just below the league average. So right around that. Caleb Williams, though, the third lowest completion percentage and eighth fewest yards per attempt against zone. So they might just do the thing that bothers him the most. I'm going with the Cardinals and that offensive line. I think they've really performed well blocking for James Conner and Kyler Murray. So I'll rock with those guys. I'll say the Cardinals get the win here and cover that small spread. Jesse, let's move quickly through the last two here. We've got the eye for the Lions and Jordan Love this weekend.
Yeah, I know you lying because you got a groin injury. Okay, so Lions, Packers, Lions favored by 2.5 in this one. Are you worried about this groin injury? It's soft tissue, senior. I know you hate to see it.
Oh, yeah. Definitely hate to see it. And if he's not practicing, this is something tough to just go on the field and play. I would think you're going to see Malik Willis, and you're going to see Malik. Well, we just talked about Minnesota, and they're blitzing at the second highest rate because you know who the highest rate is right now? It's the Lions. And I get it. Without Aiden Hutchinson, you're going to have to blitz to get to the quarterback. So that's going to be the test. If it's either one, for Jordan Love to be able to move away from the blitz, Malik Willis certainly has the ability to move away from the blitz.
It certainly does, and that's, Dad, it's one of those things that's got to be kind of difficult to legislate one way or the other, because for the Packers at this point, you've become used to Malik Willis having to come into games. He was able to bail you out last week after this groin injury happened, and so you've got some semblance of confidence. How difficult is that for the defense on the other side, though, in the Detroit Lions now having to prep for both of these quarterbacks potentially going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, one, certainly Malik can move more than the other, but you put in a game plan for both. Players are smart. They understand the difference, and they'll have different calls for different quarterbacks that they're going to work on. So I don't think that's as much an edge as offenses think when you're preparing for two quarterbacks.
Certainly not. And listen, for a defense that's been together, Aaron Glenn and that group have a lot of time under task, even with Hutch off the field and the style change there. I just think, Dad, the injury at quarterback makes this one's tough. Packers defense, give them credit the last few weeks, has been really chaotic around the line of scrimmage. We're starting to see Jeff Hafley's style show up more and more. The problem is, as we've seen, if you want to get down and try and create chaos around the line of scrimmage, the Lions are just content to thunder punch you right in the mouth, and I think they do that and get the win in the division here.
Yeah, I do. I think they win as well. I agree with you.
All right, well, we've got one more to get to here in our acrostic, and so I want to get to it next because we talked about Tua Tagovailoa and his performance from last week, coming back off the head injury, coming back off IR, and having a pretty decent game, albeit in a loss to Kyler Murray and those Arizona Cardinals that we talked about. So when we come back here, we will get to the C in our Golic NFL Weekend Preview acrostic. And an incredibly feisty Tua Tagovailoa. Apparently, he has spent the last 4 weeks sharpening his swords and getting ready to go at all of us for thinking we know good and damn well about what he's doing at quarterback next.
Shortstop guy. I have pretty good vision. I have pretty good hands. I mean, I'd like to see a lot of other people go in the back there and try to catch that ball too. You've seen it wasn't Brew's best, and Brew knows he can get it better, but it wasn't my best as well. But I'm just saying, to give perspective.
Someone's been reading the comment section, apparently. Tua Tagovailoa got some barbs for the media. Now, we've seen this in other places. Trevon Diggs just had the nice make.
Did we lost GoJo? Oh no.
I think we lost him.
I think we lost him.
Tua definitely was a little feisty there about a snap, not handling a snap. Listen, Tua back after the concussion, after everybody in the world or most people thought he should retire. And I was like, let the man make his own decision. Now they take on the Bills and Tua is back. And listen, this offense is so different with him running it than the backups running it, without question. So from that standpoint, that gives them a better chance to win. But I just think Buffalo, Keon Coleman has come on as a wide receiver, has really kind of picked it up. We'll see what Amari Cooper can bring as well. I just still think Buffalo has too much for Miami, but this is Miami's best shot. And maybe a feisty Tua can help spark this team a little bit. We haven't really heard of a feisty Tua, Mike, too much in this, have we?
Oh, is he back? No.
Oh.
Don't have him back yet.
We don't hear him.
Nope.
Oh, we don't have him back.
Don't have him back yet.
I thought we had him back.
So you think that the Bills still win this, but I don't know, feisty Tua, maybe we get the over. It's sitting at 49 right now. Is that possible, Senior?
Yeah, the 49 is, I definitely think it's possible with the way these offenses can go. Again, with Tua just throwing the deep ball to the two receivers, I without question think that for sure that this can hit the over. I'm going with the Bills in this one. The Bills are given 6, so I would give the 6. While the Dolphins are going to be at their best with Tua, no doubt about it, I just don't see him matching up well with Buffalo. Josh Allen, 14 touchdowns, just the one interception. So he has not turned the ball over, fumble some running the ball, but not turned the ball over passing, which obviously has been key. James Cook has been absolutely fantastic running the ball, 7 rushing touchdowns. Under 100 carries, but 452 yards. So he's running the ball well. That's really complementing the offense extremely well. And for Tua, again, even though how he has those deep receivers that he goes to, he throws the ball quickly downfield as well and let the receivers kind of get the yards after the catch. But I like Buffalo in this, given the 6.
Well, before we get Mike back, we don't know where he's off to right now. Before he returns and we get into our college football preview, I did want to ask you. We got a report from ESPN that came out. So it's the first year that they're allowing helmet communications with coach. Oh, Gojo's back. So maybe we just jump into our college football preview. We're going to talk about the helmet thing, but here you're back.
I want to hold off on our college football preview. We're not going to have enough time now because Tuanon tried to tank me here. And so I'm glad we survived that, and I'm glad you guys were able to get through that. I, like Dad, agree. I think the Buffalo Bills at this point are just rolling too well. Josh Allen is another guy I've seen. Yeah. As we start to legislate some of the midseason MVP stuff, it's been what we've talked about with Jared Goff and how well he's played. Lamar Jackson certainly played at that level. But Josh Allen's continued to be the catalyst for this team, along with the offensive and defensive lines that have got it done, a defense that's overcome injury. And as Dad mentioned, Keon Coleman starting to emerge in a wide receiver room that's going to have him and Amari Cooper down the home stretch. So I was wondering if the crew could get this, though, because while we've agreed on that, I did want to get to Joe Burrow and the sound that he had talking about their team and their current status at this point in the season. If we have the Joe Burrow sound, he's been asked about this team here, notorious for slow starts coming off the beginning of their season. This is Joe Burrow's bit of State of the Union for the Bengals.
see arguably the three elite teams right now in the AFC all making moves, Bills, Chiefs, and Ravens. What goes through your mind when you see those teams getting better?
That's not my job.
Do you ever wish that, the team would, the organization would give you another weapon or two, or one?
Joe not taking the bait on that one, Dad, but he is getting asked the uncomfortable question that we see, and I know Cowboys fans feel this at times as a team sits on their hands despite saying they're all in. Watching them, and I get it, they're not massive moves, but watching the Kansas City Chiefs go out and trade for DeAndre Hopkins, go and get Josh Uche from the New England Patriots, watching Baltimore go out here and try and add talent as well, it's got to be frustrating. But at the same time, I'm not going to say it's Joe Burrow's job to go out here and publicly chide the organization. He's a player. He's competitive. I'm sure he believes that it's his responsibility to go out there and perform requisite with his contract and to do it with whoever the organization gets. He's got enough on his plate. He doesn't need to be playing pseudo GM in the media.
Listen, and they don't need to trade for any passing help. I mean, their passing in the league is just fine. They're in the top 10. I think they're 8th in passing. They can't run the ball. They didn't solve that in the offseason, much like the Dallas Cowboys didn't solve their rushing attack. They lost Joe Mixon, who was running the ball incredibly well in Houston, and they're not helping their defense. Their defensive side of the ball has given up too many points. So the passing attack for Cincinnati is not the issue. So I don't know of any running backs that are out there that you can trade for, but like I said, the running game is atrocious, and their defense gives up too much. So Joe and his passing with T. Higgins when he's out there, obviously healthy enough, and Jamar Chase, I think, is fine. I don't think that's the issue.
No, the offense hasn't been the problem. We know they can't stop the run defensively. There's been a few teams in football this year, like the Cowboys we talked about, that are really unfun to analyze because when you do the simplest things so poorly in the league right now, everyone else has started to realize we can just go and punish you there instead of having to make this more complicated than it needs to be. Especially, we talked about some of those teams they're going to face in the AFC North, like the Steelers, like the Baltimore Ravens, that are going to make life really difficult on them in that regard. And so, yeah, Dad, I think it's more just this is kind of an optics thing because we talked about the moves that some of the other teams in the AFC had made. We don't know if they're going to pan out and be game-changing moves for these teams. You're already talking about a Kansas City team that's undefeated. You're talking about a Baltimore team that's looked like on certain days the best team in the NFL. And so these are insurance moves. They're low-risk, high-upside plays that you can make when you're good teams, but also competent organizations. And that's what you can say about Baltimore and Kansas City is they're very forward-thinking and aggressive in how they try and go out and acquire talent. And I don't think anyone's going to confuse that for the Cincinnati Bengals, who are an organization that's often been chastised for not being as committed to winning as they should be, despite the effort of players and coaches alike.
You're absolutely right about the trades for Baltimore and Kansas City. Those were insurance policies. Cincinnati needs something to help improve their parts of the defense and parts of the offense. And it's just not going to happen. I mean, you're not going to get somebody in a trade or off the couch that is going to drastically change. There are going to be pieces that fit, like a DeAndre Hopkins and a Deontay Johnson, that fit into the offense and can help the offense, but nothing's going to reverse the dismal aspect of a running game or stopping the run. I mean, we can talk about the high-flying NFL of the passing attack of the NFL to passing league, but some things never change. Turnovers kill you. If you can't run the ball and you can't stop the run, and God forbid you can't do either of them, you're in trouble. And Cincinnati, like we talked about Dallas, can't do either of them. So the basic fundamentals of football, and that's controlling the lines of scrimmage, that Cincinnati just struggles at.
It does. And now you're getting a reprieve this week because the Raiders coming to town. I mean, we talked about some of the difficulties for the Jets. The Raiders have lost 4 straight right now. We know the quarterback situation. You tried to go away from Gardner Minshew. You've been back to him because of injury. And this team last week got shelled on the ground by the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't think they rushed for more than 40 yards in that game as a team, but that's against the Chiefs defense. It's one of the best in the NFL and certainly one of the best in the NFL against the run right now. If you're the Bengals, you can't be the get-right game for this team who has been in disarray for most of this season, who the conversation we've had around them is basically which of their parts are they going to sell off next. They've got a really good D-line. That's what should worry you here is, hey, we didn't get the trade for Max Crosby. He still lives out there. And so if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, that's the one area you have to worry is the continued health and safety of Joe Burrow. But everything else, Dad, this should be a game that they win. They're 7-point favorites in this game at home. And so I don't worry about them this week, but I also don't feel overly threatened by this version of the Bengals yet as a contender in the AFC.
No, I don't see 3 making it out of the North. I see Pittsburgh and Baltimore make it out of the North. I don't see Cincinnati. I agree. It should be a get-right game with Las Vegas because Cincinnati can score in the passing game and Vegas can't score that many points. So I agree that they could win this game, but I agree I don't think they're going to be a threat, A, in the North for the division, and B, in the North for a wild card spot. So I think they're in a tough spot. I just don't think they did enough work in the offseason.
No, and you mentioned it's going to be fascinating to now watch them as a foil of the Browns for the rest of the season. Because Jameis Winston, I'm not ready to say is getting ready for a Joe Flacco-esque run like we saw last year with that Browns team. But it's become abundantly clear any replacement level quarterback in that offense can go out and do more than they were getting from Deshaun Watson. And when that happens, you saw the spark back with that Cleveland Browns defense. So now if that group can play at an elite level again, Dad, you've got something to hang your hat on in Cleveland as you go up against a team like the Bengals, who is deficient on that other side of the ball. And maybe if you start to get a little bit healthier, Nick Chubb and that effect of him on the offense starts to come back, you might not be out of the woods with them as a landmine team for the rest of the season. So the AFC North, fascinating, maybe not quite as fascinating as the NFC West that we've talked about, but certainly something to look at here. Jesse mentioned it. So we've had a little bit of a topsy-turvy day here because of technology. We appreciate everyone bearing with us. Heather Dinich, ESPN college football reporter, is going to join us off the top of the next hour to talk about the playoff picture. We'll get you set with our weekend preview for that. But you guys did mention, I just had to laugh. We've come off the NFL this weekend where a bunch of dumb stuff can happen in the NFL, but you don't have to worry about the basic stuff. Like we had the helmet comm situation in college football going on these last couple of weeks where the Big 12 raised a stink about the frequency of the headset communication between players and coaches apparently being on a frequency that can be accessed by broadcasts and not an encrypted one the way the NFL does. Dad, this is a reminder as we get set to transition to college football. This is an incredibly stupid sport that we all love and enjoy, and it didn't get any smarter just because they started trying to mimic the things that the NFL does.
I mean, how do you not, if you're going to mimic the NFL and go to communications, why not study what they do and do what they do? Encrypted and not encrypted. Now, most fans are going to be like, wait, what the hell are we talking about? But yes, when the offensive coordinator is calling plays to the quarterback or the defensive coordinator calling plays to the defensive play caller, it is out there. Others can hear it. How you don't encrypt it, and they're going to obviously work on that now, but it's just a head scratcher. I mean, how if you're going to invest into something, invest in it where you see it works, and it works in the NFL. Now they've had issues occasionally, but for the most part, 90%, 95% of the time, it works in the NFL. Just mimic what the NFL is doing. I have no idea why they went another route.
I don't either. This seems like a really silly oversight. But again, in the NFL, you've got people in charge. And in college football, you've got a bunch of different people trying to cobble this together. The Big 12 came out and said that none of its games were compromised by this. Because really what you're talking about is these could have, in theory, been accessed by someone with a radio who just tuned into the right frequency.
Right.
I was calling games where people had to change the frequency of the sideline reporters' mics so that it wouldn't conflict with this, which all seemed weird until now I realized, hey, college football wasn't necessarily doing this the right way. So just something to keep in mind as we get set to talk about Heather Dinich, about all this very smart, important stuff with the college football playoff and a committee that's going to try and decide this sport in an expanded field this season, and we feel like we're a big old grown-up sport now because players are getting money. We're still doing stuff like this in the margins, so when weird stuff happens towards the end of the season, let's not all act surprised because we should know better so that we can do better. So coming up next, we'll get to Heather, we'll get to our college football weekend preview here on GoJo and Golic next. All right, welcome back. As we mentioned, ESPN's Heather Dinich going to join us in about a minute here, but we got a big weekend coming up, and so it's time to cash it or trash it. Cash it or trash it is presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. The big one this weekend, Ohio State going on the road for a nooner at Happy Valley against Penn State. The current line, 2.5. We've seen it at 2.5. We've seen it at 3. Obviously, a big difference there. I like Ohio State in this game. Call me old-fashioned, but I still have some concerns about if Drew Aller, if he's out there at all, a game-time decision at quarterback, can make the big plays needed to beat the Buckeyes. All right, hour number 2 here on GoJo and Golic. We'll have our college football weekend preview coming up here shortly. But to help us not only talk about a big weekend in the sport, but the upcoming week next week. Yes, we know next Tuesday is big for a lot of people, but maybe for no one more so than our friend Heather Dinich, ESPN college football senior writer, and the foremost czar of what's going on inside the college football playoff selection committee room. So, Heather, good morning. How you doing?
Good morning. Good morning. I'm great. Thanks.
Recovering from Halloween like the rest of us, huh?
Yeah. Did I sell it well? Great.
Yes, exactly. Really enjoying life right now. So, well, Heather, speaking of just the enjoyment of it, I'm curious from your perspective, because you're one of the people I associate most with the college football playoff selection process. You always do such a great job of translating and explaining what's going on inside one of the more complicated rooms in sports. And you've done it for now covering this the last decade with 4 teams involved in that. So how excited are you about what new conversations might pop up as we go into next Tuesday in an expanded 12-team playoff field?
Guys, I'm thrilled for this because we, as members of the media, are talking about the likes of BYU, Boise State, Indiana. This is a far deeper field. And I think this particular first ranking is going to be really hard for the selection committee. The top 25 is always hard, but when you get to those 9 to 12, 13, 14 teams, it matters more than ever because they're going to be having a chance to compete for the national title, right? And so how much is that in the back of their minds as they go deeper into their top 25? And the ranking is different than the seeding. I think college football fans just need to know that the way the committee approaches their top 25 doesn't change in terms of strength of schedule and head-to-head and all those things we have been talking about for the past decade. But now you're measuring teams that you guys know this, you played, there's a line between good and great. And when you're talking about 4 teams, you're typically talking about great teams. Now you're trying to decipher a bunch of good teams with average to below average schedules. How does that play out? And not even the people in the room know that yet.
So, and you're right to make that point that there's really no extra work for the committee. They put out a top 25 anyway. Now it just goes to 12 instead of 4. How many, and we're going to have, or do you think, and if so, how many 2-loss teams could we potentially have in the top 12?
Well, that's a great question. And let's see what happens to Ohio State at Penn State this week. And if they join that club, I mean, you're looking at LSU, Alabama. Can Ole Miss survive against a better Arkansas team? If not, I think they're in trouble. I do think, too, as we sit here today, is probably the barometer because at some point you have to have some good wins on your schedule. And as tough as the SEC and Big Ten are, if you don't beat the only 2 great teams on your schedule, are you a playoff team? Who else is out there and what are they being compared against? So I think we'll see, it's hard to answer how many. I don't know if Ohio State will get in with 2 losses. And the difference between a 2-loss playoff contender, at least in my mind through the way the committee sees it, as an example, is a Georgia team that runs the table and loses in the SEC championship game. Because then you have a Georgia team who lost to Alabama, beat Ole Miss, beat Tennessee along the way, is playing for the SEC championship and slips up again. That's one of the best 2-loss resumes. A bad 2-loss resume is a Miami that loses to Duke or anybody else they play this season and loses to Clemson in the ACC championship game. That's a different 2-loss conversation.
Yeah, and the 2-loss conversation now being one that we get to have is such a new wrinkle in all of this. Heather, as we go into next Tuesday, who's the team that you're most curious to see among the groups that have a loss or maybe 2, the team you're most curious to see how the committee ranks and supports?
Well, this one hits home for you guys, but Notre Dame, man, Notre Dame, because they have one of the best wins in the country against Texas A&M, and they have the worst loss. And Notre Dame fans don't want to hear this, but I am telling you, there will be people in that room on Tuesday who point out that NIU loss. And the question is, how much does the head-to-head matter? Because it is a tiebreaker between teams with comparable records, but it is not the end-all be-all. And they have been playing great. I was at MetLife Stadium. I saw what they did against Navy. They're looking good. Denbrock's got the offense better. You saw the explosive plays. They haven't been lacking. But Navy's probably not going to be a top 25 after those 6 turnovers, are they? How good is Navy? How good is a win against Georgia Tech and Louisville in the eyes of the committee? Is it enough to offset that home loss, knowing they've clearly gotten better? And I think they're somewhere around 11, 12, 13, but at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because if they run the table, I think an 11-1 Notre Dame team is in, if they continue to play like they did against Navy.
Yeah, I would agree, but they are in a precarious position. There's no doubt about it. How soon do you think the Power Four or Greg Sankey wants to get rid of the group of 5 getting the 12 spot no matter what? If they're outside of 12, they're going to bump a Power Four team out of number 12.
Well, I don't important thing to remember about that is that when they did the new contract with ESPN that goes from 2026 and beyond, 6 more years, the group of 5 is included in that. So if that were to change, I don't think it would happen anytime in the near future. But the other thing to note about that is if you have a BYU or an Iowa State stumble along the way, you can have Boise State ranked ahead of them. And you can have the Mountain West Conference champion get that first round bye as one of the 4 highest ranked conference champions instead of the Big 12 champ, or maybe a 2-loss ACC champ. So it depends on what happens. I think, honestly, the bigger change going forward is going to be the debate amongst the commissioners for automatic qualifiers.
So I'm just thinking of this quick. So technically, you could have the Big 12 out of the top 12, out of a playoff picture, if the Mountain West were to be in the top 4, and the Big 12 would have to have an at-large bid. They could actually be left out if all of a sudden BYU and Iowa State start to stumble toward the end of the season?
No, the Big 12 champion would still be one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions, but they wouldn't get the first round bye, which means they'd have to win 4 straight games to win the national title. But I'm going to circle back on that because it's important people understand this. It is the 5 highest ranked conference champions, period. That could be Conference USA, Sun Belt, MAC, American. I don't care who it is. Pick one of your 9 FBS conference champions, and that could be it. People assume, and rightfully so, historically, it's going to be the Power 4 and a group of 5, right? But that's not how it's set up. The door is open for any of the 5 highest ranked conference champions.
And to Heather's point on that right now, you've obviously got Boise State occupying that top spot as the highest ranked group of 5 team at 15 in the AP poll at the head of the Mountain West. But Army down there in the American lurking at 21 right now, we know has an opportunity to not only play and win that conference, has a game against Notre Dame that could certainly be a huge resume booster for them. So not out of the realm of possibility. And Lord knows we remember Cincinnati as the lone entrant into the old college football playoff did have to do that by being ranked inside that top 4 in the final poll, and was able to while they were a member of the American, now the Big 12. Heather, zooming out away from the college football playoff for just a second here, you've seen and watched a ton of college football so far this season, and you mentioned we usually had great teams at the top. It doesn't feel like the sport's got one great team right now as we've been through this early run in the season. Oregon currently ranked as the top spot right now. Do you think they are undoubtedly the best team in the sport at this moment?
At this moment, yes. And they are the team I feel the most confident in getting to the college football playoff based on what we've seen so far and what they have yet to do. But it's interesting you say that because, and I asked Texas A&M coach Mike Elko that. I said, it feels like in the past we've had these dominant teams. And you know what he said to me? He said, we've been spoiled by generational teams, like back-to-back Georgia, like Alabama. He said, it's just been a couple of years where we've had national title teams, 2019 LSU, that you don't see all the time. Now we're kind of getting back to normal. And he said some of that might become because it's so much more difficult for teams to just stockpile first-round NFL draft picks. They're everywhere.
It is a great point.
How about the Heisman race?
Go for it, Dad.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mike. The Heisman race, what's generally been a quarterback award, do we see a non-quarterback, Ashton Jeanty or Travis Hunter, being able to pull it off this year over a Cam Ward or Dylan Gabriel?
Absolutely. If Heisman voters are paying attention the way they should be, I mean, talk about generational. Travis Hunter is doing something we have not seen in decades. And I will remind my fellow Heisman voters that the award goes to the best player in the country, not the best quarterback. And Ashton Jeanty is a machine. He's a machine. So yes, absolutely. I think it's going to be a difficult vote for Heisman voters.
An extremely difficult one. Ashton Genty, I mean, God, how high the bar we put for non-quarterbacks where the guy has 128 yards in a win, and somehow we're going, well, that's below your usual standard, and so now we're going to downgrade you in our minds. It's a strange place we live in, but as you said, Heather, that's a guy that has put himself on the map very early this season and has a chance to carry that to New York. You guys, make sure you follow her at CFB Heather on Twitter, especially as we get into the next month here. No one better at translating everything that's going on inside that CFP room than the great Heather Dinich. We appreciate the time. Good luck with the rest of the Halloween hangover here. We're rooting for you and parents everywhere that have to recover from one of the biggest nights of the year.
Thank you, guys. You're my favorite football family. Have fun this weekend.
Thanks,
Heather. You too. We appreciate it. And Dad, what Heather mentioned at the beginning about the expanded playoff here, I do think has been the nicest byproduct is I've seen some people complain, hey, we're discussing a lot of teams that aren't as good as the ones we were used to talking about in the past. That's good because like she hinted at there with Mike Elko, that's more of college football than not. And what a great thing for so many fan bases in college football who understand, hey, my team's probably never going to look like 2019 LSU, like 2020 Alabama, or the Georgia teams from the last 3 years, to still say, hey, we can get a lot of conversation in the national media, more people watching our games, and a potential shot at the ultimate prize, even if I don't think it's super realistic.
Yeah, but I think so, and I don't know if you agree. I think it's more wide open this year. I think this is a good year to go to 12. Now, it doesn't mean that 9 through 12 is going to have a chance, but obviously if you're playing, you have a chance. But I think it's more of an open door than it has been in the 4 playoff area where an Alabama has been dominant, a Clemson for a time early on in the 14 playoff has been dominant. I look at Oregon and I look at Georgia, but both beatable. Even though Oregon hasn't lost, I certainly think both are beatable.
I would agree. Oregon just in general, the Ohio State game was kind of a step forward, and I do think they've made strides in the trenches, but Georgia offensively still seems gettable. Penn State, they're kind of the one, Dad. I look at it as more of a top 5 with Oregon, Georgia, Ohio State, Miami, and Texas, and say Penn State's got to prove to me it belongs in that tax bracket at this point because we just haven't seen it yet with James Franklin and company. But that top 5 all seem to me a little bit separated from the rest of the group, but all have shown flaws enough in the early part of the season to where I could say, hey, there is not a 2019 LSU walking through the door that feels like a buzzsaw in this group. And so you're right, it does feel more accessible. And because we've got some interesting teams in the Big 12, some other teams in the back end of the SEC, Notre Dame, as she mentioned, there are a bunch of chaos agents out there ready to go.
Well, as we're going to discuss, Penn State has every opportunity in the world to put themselves up legitimately with the big boys.
Happy Valley at noon, going to be the center of the football universe this weekend. We'll talk about keys to victory if you're Penn State trying to pull the upset next on GoJo and Golic. right, thanks to our friend Heather Dinich, ESPN college football senior writer, for stopping by and helping us think about the playoff. Now it's time to think about this weekend, and it's time to do it in the cheesiest way possible. This college football weekend preview is brought to you by our friends at Cheez-It. This college football season, we're feeling the cheesiest with Cheez-It. And you and I were just talking about this. Shout out to the folks at Cheez-It, by the way. In a day and age where so many chips, especially, and snacks of that variety are filling half the bag with air and shortchanging you on the product, Cheez-It is a snack with ass that you can trust, fills that bag to the brim, and gives you every bit of bang for your buck.
I mean, even so far as when they give away the little bags of Cheez-Its on the plane, I've gotten them. The bag,
Yes.
it's the smaller bag, but it's packed. It's full. You don't open it and all the air comes out of it, and you're reaching your hand, halfway down to get to what you want to get to. Kudos to them. They fill the box. They fill the bag. You're always getting your money's worth with Cheez-Its, without question. And take it from the Golic. We are the king of snack family.
Exactly. So we're here to help you get the best snacks possible and hopefully have some information about these football games this weekend. So let's get to the Cheez-It college football slate of this weekend. Let's start off with the big one, Dad. We talked with Heather about it a little bit. We've hinted at it in the show. Number 4, Ohio State heads to Happy Valley to take on number 3, Penn State. Now, Ohio State is a 3-point road favorite in a game that this is the mile marker for Penn State. All the changes they made in the offseason, Drew Aller's progress of the quarterback, should he play in this game? And he is a true game-time decision, according to Penn State head coach James Franklin. But this is the dragon that they've got to slay to show people they are ready to take the next step from being a team that's perennially very good to a team that can compete in the college football playoff. So, Dad, what are you most interested to see in this game against these two Big Ten rivals? Which, by the way, feels nice. In a world where so many of the matchups this year have been new stuff, this is an old-school, actual Big Ten rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, is Drew Aller going to play? You mentioned game-time decision. I mean, that's obviously going to be huge. I still like Ohio State in this game, but man, what everybody is waiting for Penn State to do, this is the game. They win this game. They have after that they have a 500 Washington team, a 1-win Purdue team, a 5-3 Minnesota team, and a 4-4 Maryland team. Now those records will obviously change as the weeks go on, but this is their test. This is it. And Ohio State playing for their play in the Big Ten championship lives. I already have a Big Ten loss to Oregon. A second one would certainly knock them out. And by the way, Ohio State still has Indiana on the schedule, who's undefeated in the conference. But this, without question, is James Franklin's chance to put himself on the map. Now, listen, people would say, and their fans would say, oh, we're on the map. Look where we're ranked. Okay, where Penn State fans feel that they're ranked high and should be ranked high, there's a lot, and I think you and I are part of them, that think they're probably a little too high, sitting at number 3, that maybe they're not the third best team in the country, but they can shut a lot of people up. They get the game at home. So this obviously is a monster game. That being said, I like Ohio State in the game.
I lean Ohio State on this one. The team is still incredibly talented. Now, you're dealing with injury along the offensive line against a Penn State defensive front that's already one of the best run defenses in college football, going up against an Ohio State group that got punched in the mouth a little bit against Nebraska last week in a game they very easily could have lost. Josh Simmons already ruled out because of a knee injury at left tackle, and his backup, Zen Mikulski, also questionable after he had to exit the Nebraska game early. So reshuffling along an offensive line that already, Dad, was starting to look a little bit like the same offensive lines we've seen from Ohio State in for a while, despite the change at coordinator with Chip Kelly coming over and all those things. So I worry a bit about that group. I still trust this Ohio State skill group and Will Howard to go get it done on the outside. And on the other side, Ohio State is a team that is top 10 in college football in sack rate. They lead the Big Ten in sack rate, I should say, at 9.7%. This is where the quarterback question becomes really interesting to me, because Bo Pribula, who's the backup quarterback for Penn State, more of the mobile quarterback. When he came in that win against Wisconsin, it was zone reads, it was RPOs, and that offensive line that has two great backs in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to block for looked as physical and confident as I've seen all year long, simplifying the equation, running a lot of zone read, and being able to tee off up front. Even if Drew Aller plays, I think that Bo should see some time. That package is something that bared fruit for them at the end and got them a win against Wisconsin in the second half of that game. and I think could go a long way. If all of a sudden Drew Aller and that passing attack aren't coming online, this could be a really similar situation to what we saw from Texas A&M a weekend ago against LSU.
Yeah, and we talk about great tight end play in the NFL. You don't hear a lot about dominant tight end play in college. But Penn State's tight end, Tyler Warren, almost single-handedly beat USC. This dude, I think he has 47 catches on the year. He is going to get that's a job for Ohio State, is to shut him down, because he's going to get his opportunities for a game. That's the first time these two teams have met, both ranked in the top 5 since 1996. When number 3 Ohio State beat Penn State, number 4 Penn State, 38-7. So this is a rarity, a matchup in the top 5, and you could pick a lot of stars in this game to who is going to shine the most. A lot of times you get an unsung hero, but make no mistake, this is James Franklin's chance to absolutely secure a spot for Penn State on the top of the leaderboard map.
Yep, I don't know if it's quite an elimination game, but it feels a lot like it. And James Franklin, I think, while Ryan Day, there's a ton of pressure on him in terms of what the people in that city continue to think of him despite all of his success, they're still ultimately going to be defined by the game up north and what happens against Michigan, which feels infinitely winnable. Right. For James Franklin, you got to go show you can finally win one of these games. And so I think there's a ton of pressure on both sides. We're both rolling with Ohio State. Let's go on to the SEC here, Jesse. We've got Texas A&M coming off a big win, firmly establishing themselves in the CFP conversation, get ready to go against a team that is a live dog, or Gamecock, I guess.
Yeah, Texas A&M, last undefeated team in the SEC. Like that little innuendo there. So do you think they can keep it rolling on the road against South Carolina? This feels like it's one of those moments where, you could see kind of a scary upset, perhaps?
Potentially, Dad. We saw South Carolina give Alabama hell at a time where they were incredibly vulnerable. That defense is one of the best in college football. They've got some of the best pass rushers in the sport. They're 3rd in sacks, 2nd in PFF's pass rush grade. They've been dynamic on that side of the ball. And right now, we've got a legitimate quarterback question for Mike Elko and this Texas A&M squad, Dad. Haven't named a starter for this weekend between Connor Wegman and Marcel Reed, who Connor Wegman benched in favor of Marcel Reed in the second half of that LSU game. Are you surprised at all by that, the indecision around this, given what we just saw play out?
I definitely am. I think they're much more dangerous with Reed at quarterback, much more dangerous. Now, he may not be the passer Wegman is, but boy, that added running ability would be huge. And listen, they may need that in this game. You're going up against a South Carolina D-line that's 3rd in the SEC against the run. Texas A&M tailback Le'Veon Moss helps lead a rushing attack that's I think 9th nationally, averaging 221 yards a game. And Reed can only help that. My gosh, I just think I am surprised that they haven't named Reed the starter. Now, we don't know what's going on in practice. Are they splitting number 1 reps? Is Reed getting most of the number 1 reps? That we don't know. But this is an interesting matchup with Texas A&M being the only undefeated team left in the SEC, and they're just a 2.5-point favorite over South. I think it's 2.5. 2.5-point favorite over South Carolina.
3. I've seen the lines moved a little bit there, but it is somewhat surprising, Dad. But I think that is respect for the chaos agent that is Alabama. The Beamer ball thing. I know we wear that moniker into the ground, but especially with how vicious that defense this been year. Now, the offense has been abysmal. The South Carolina offense is 116th in 3rd down conversions, 79th in giveaways, 116th in pass attempts, 114th in yards per play. Yeah. They're not a good offense. Lenora Sellers is just enough of a roller coaster at quarterback, though, and a mobile guy that can make you worry. But that Texas A&M defense, man, if you haven't put eyes on these dudes yet, I encourage you to watch. That front 4 makes me so happy I don't play football anymore, and specifically play offensive line anymore. That is a group of freaks. Just straight up Bruce Feldman freaksless monsters up front. And you're getting them on both sides of the ball, but the difference is South Carolina's allowed 32 sacks this season, Texas A&M just 11. And I think with Marcel Reed, who, Dad, hey, I get it. Make them prepare for both quarterbacks. It's usually good gamesmanship. I don't blame them. Even if Wegman starts, we know the leash is going to be short. And going up against a good run defense, you saw it was night and day. And I get LSU came into this season with questions about defense. They've played a lot better on that side of the football after the coordinator change, but the quarterback run element just completely threw them for a loop. And I think what Marcel Reed allows them to do and the effect that he can have on a defense, being as dynamic he is, you're going to need him to beat South Carolina, whether it's the starter or a guy still playing a lion's share of snaps. So I think, long story short, I think Texas A&M wins this game. I think defensively, they're going to be too much. Obviously, playing in South Carolina, that's a difficult place to play, but I do think now that the Marcel Reed version of the offense seems to be something they're willing to go to more often. Colin Klein, he's got a kink, man. He's just more comfortable calling quarterback run. It's what he was as a player, and it's who he's been as a coach. And so I think they can get that done even on the road in a hostile environment.
Yep, I think Texas A&M wins, and I think they cover as well. It's a low number, and that again is kudos to South Carolina and what they've done. But I'll go with Texas A&M and give the points.
Yep, I think Texas A&M just figured out that identity a little bit against LSU. They were at home for that one, though, so now they're going to have to go prove, like we've seen a lot of teams struggling on the road this college football season with the pre-snap stuff, with the penalties, all of which can make life pretty difficult there. Jesse, let's get to this last game here. The ACC has got an interesting group of undefeated still left that are getting ready, at least two of them, to square off this weekend.
Yeah, and it's one of the few ranked-on-ranked team matchups we're going to see this weekend. So number 20 SMU, number 18 Pitt. Is Pitt better than people are giving them credit for, guys? How do you feel about this one?
Dad, Pitt is a lot different than what we've seen recently, because the joke was that when Pat Narduzzi saw Kenny Pickett and that offense perform so well and win an ACC championship years ago, the defensive coach in him just couldn't stomach seeing the ball move that much, and so he had to regress the offense a little bit. He changed that up this year. They went out and they hired an offensive coordinator that's taken them to the next level in Cade Bell, who runs an up-tempo system. The Panthers are 133rd in times of possession, so they get up and go. And with Eli Holstein healthy enough to go in this game, that's going to be more of the formula, Dad. The defense is still vicious. We saw the number that they did last week against Syracuse and a quarterback that's a pretty darn good one. But I do think this Pitt team probably is getting under-talked about in an ACC that outside of Miami doesn't really have anyone getting a lot of national attention.
Yeah, and for SMU, it looks like Kevin Jennings, their quarterback, is going to play. As lastly, the coach had said they got a bunch of basically beat-up guys right now. And this is the point of the season where nobody's healthy, and it's just a matter of who gets medically cleared to play. And it looks like Jennings is going to be cleared to play. And for Pitt, running the ball is certainly going to be difficult. Now, their quarterback, obviously, Holstein, has 17 touchdowns and to 5 interceptions. But SMU run defense gives up just 88 yards a game, 2.7 yards a carry, both fifth best nationally. So they're a tough team to run on. You're going to have to go through the air to beat them.
I would agree. 7 points is 7.5, a little bit rich for my blood. Getting the hook there on that one. I'd say if I'm getting 7.5, I'll take SMU in the points here. Big spread on the road. You mentioned they're pretty beat up, but this is a team a lot of people, too, I think are going to overreact to what happened against Duke a week ago. SMU had 6 turnovers in that game, took none away, and still managed to go get a win versus the Duke Blue Devils. But they had 469 yards of offense that game. The offense converted on half their third down chances, didn't give up any sacks. They were great in that game, and Rhett Lashley said as much in front of the microphone. It just, because of the turnovers, put them in such a tough spot. That defense stepped up, so I do think they're going to be able to keep it close.
Yeah, I do as well. They did have a tough one against Duke going overtime, without question. I agree. I would take Pittsburgh in this one, but I'm not giving 7. That seems to be a big number at SMU.
Yeah, especially if it's 7.5 and you're going to get the hook, I'm willing to take that one now. This Pitt defense has to be a group after your own heart, has gone out there and produced at a pretty, I'd say, standard Pittsburgh defense level, playing more snaps than any team in the country at 76.3 snaps a game on average. So an incredible slate this weekend, plenty of storylines to watch that now we can talk about and not feel bad about it, are getting ready to affect what this committee is going to do, ranking these teams for the first time on Tuesday as we look ahead to an expanded playoff field for the first time right now. Ball's in your court, fellas. Go make it work.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield, Mike Golic Jr. and Mike Golic Sr. here the day after Halloween, where, you guys dressed up yesterday. I unfortunately couldn't be here. So we had the Pop-Tart. We had a Harry Potter student at Hogwarts. It was amazing. By the way, Senior, which house were you?
Ooh, good question. He has no idea.
He has no idea?
Wait, which house was I for what?
You were a Hogwarts student yesterday.
Oh, I don't. I was Gryffindor.
Oh,
How about that?
Okay, yes.
All right, I'm glad you at least knew one of the names here. I was going to give him the out, Jesse, and say that he is aged out of student range and is probably a professor there. So
wait a minute,
probably
there's
the defense
there's
against the dark arts teacher.
Isn't there Slytherin as well?
Yeah, Slytherin's
Yes.
given like sneaky vibes. Is that what you were feeling yesterday?
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yes, I was Gryffindor. I was the good house.
Yeah, no, you would have been sorted into Gryffindor, Senior. I can say that with confidence.
There's a no more obvious Gryffindor in the history of Hogwarts than my father, Mike Golic Sr. So we had that. Jesse, you balled out with ray gun. We saw the picture there at the end of the show. Crushed that out. Did you do the moves for anyone? Did you do that once just for posterity and actually get in the ground and do the sandwich move?
Yeah, I actually did at the party I was at, like a couple times. Broke it out on the floor, did some moves.
And the good thing is your costume, unlike Mike's, with the Pop-Tart, your costume, you can move in it. That's always a key, especially if you're going out to walk with kids or to a party. You want to be able to look cool, but be able to move. And you were right with the times with ray gun, but you were able to still, be mobile.
That's what was so appealing about the costume to me, is I was like, this is a sweatsuit and I can wear sneakers.
Yeah.
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 That's honestly what I saw as the life hack for a lot of adult costumes. My buddy Dane that I was out with last night, 2 years in a row, has been a character from a movie. He was Sully from Monsters, Inc. last year, and then was the dad from Bluey this year. And all they are just big adult onesies with a little hood on them. So you get to throw on sneakers. You're comfortable, maybe a little warm. It's Southern California, so it's 65 and sunny when we're trick-or-treating, but I digress. It's a great life hack for parents to find comfy costumes that make it easier to walk and drink and tolerate all the loud noises before the sugar crash comes eventually. So we all balled out with our individual costumes here. We know around the various sports leagues, though, there were plenty of players, coaches, and team personnel that took this seriously. So we wanted to do the Halloween post-fashion rundown, Jesse. Where do we start with this?
Okay, the legend who gets it right every year, right? Okay, Myles Garrett, he continued to dominate with his Terminator costume. And I read that he worked with like a Hollywood makeup artist to get this mask going. And I don't know if you guys saw, but he also decorated his front lawn. He decorated his house with a whole like Terminator inspired like car crash thing going on. So it was pretty cool. He really committed to the bit.
Well, what's cool is when he did his front yard and he put tombstones up of all the quarterbacks that he sacked. That was a neat thing. That was very, very cool. But he wins every year. I mean, this is going to a game. So I don't know how much makeup you have to take off, or if it was just a mask that was a makeup on the mask and you just take the mask off. But oh my God. I mean, he wins. He goes all out and balls out and wins every year. It's incredible.
Yeah,
so
it was a
this
mask,
is the leeway,
I think.
It's the leeway you get when you're a great player, because if you're a back end of the roster guy and you're seen working with a Hollywood crew on your mask, now all of a sudden everyone's looking at you sideways like, shouldn't you be doing some other stuff? When you're Myles freaking Garrett, who, lest we not forget, did have to field a bunch of dumbass questions about his commitment to football coming out in the draft despite being a space alien dinosaur hybrid that was going to go and maul offensive linemen for the next 15 years. This is a guy who is in a position to go out and do this, Dad, as you well know.
I'm so happy he did too, because being questioned about being too philosophical, and too into books, and so I was like, are you kidding me? Dude can turn it on and off, and he has done it. Let me just say, Mike, as a back end roster, a draft pick, I never dressed up going to a game. Now, we had Halloween parties I dressed up, but never going to a game. I mean, the players in all sports, as we're going to see, they take it serious now.
Kyle Kuzma fell into that ranks. A longtime pregame dresser has decided to retire from the game of the pregame fit check, so he might not be in this list. But, Jesse, we have another NBA star that's been more than willing to step up in his place.
Yeah, Wemby came out in an absolutely terrifying costume from the movie Spirited Away, which I don't know if you guys have seen it, but gave me nightmares for years. One of those movies where they said kids could see it, and it was truly nightmare-inducing. So there he is from Spirited Away. I'm terrified just looking at this video.
Well, the problem is it's not just the Spirited Away character. It's a 7'4" version. Anything Wemby dresses up as is going to be scary because no one should be that big.
I've never seen the movie, so I don't know this character. But as you said, Mike, as it's walking toward you, you'd think, oh, my God, this person is on stilts. When no, he's not. He is not on stilts. That is his normal size.
Yeah, well, I remember being taken to this movie by my mom, and it's like a 10-year-old girl goes with her parents who get turned into pigs, and then it turns out she has to work for these spirits to try to earn her freedom and her parents' freedom. It will stay with you, so don't watch it.
Wow, all right, we've tapped into some trauma here this morning. By the way, Victor Wembanyama, trauma for the defense. There's a segue. Had a 5x5 game last night, a stat line that sounds more like a breakfast menu item at Denny's. 25 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 steals, and 5 block. He is just the third player with multiple 5x5 games all time, joining Akeem Olajuwon that had 6 and Andre Kirilenko that had 3. Wemby now has 2. His last one was against the Lakers last February.
I know it's early, but isn't this a battle with him and Chet Holmgren for Defensive Player of the Year and block kings of the NBA? Oh, my gosh, it's setting up great.
And Chet and OKC gave him work the other night. Victor Wembanyama, career low 6 points in that matchup against OKC. And there's no love lost between those two, which is awesome.
No.
Young, very tall, skinny guys who don't like each other on teams in the Western Conference. Sign me the bleep up. Jesse, who do we got next?
Yeah, Thomas Morstead showed up to the game last night, friend of the program, BTW. Hey, how you doing? As his interim head coach. Check out this outfit. He looks great here. Look at him. Look at him go. You love to see it when you dress up as your interim head coach.
For those that don't know, Jeff Ulbrich was a tough linebacker in the NFL for a number of years. This is a great costume. Morstead's kind of jacked too. I mean, he's pulling off a nice body for it as well.
That's really what I think this is about, is Timo wanted to show off the work, which I respect. A guy at a certain age, punters don't always get that respect. So shout out to him for pulling it off and reminding everyone. And by the way, I don't think anyone in the history of coaching has looked more like a former tough linebacker than Jeff Ulbrich, who you could see on the sideline, the salt and pepper beard. He looks like a retired military general.
Listen, we have added to the king of the ring for NFL coaches, with Gerard Mayo coming in, with Jeff Ulbrich. Now, it's not like Robert Saleh was out of shape or anything, but Jeff Ulbrich, I mean, dude, former linebacker in the league. The battle royale has gotten tougher. There's no doubt about it with head coaches.
King of the Mountain, Dan Campbell, still maintains his throne, but has the grip loosened. We'll find out next time. Speaking of the former king of the NFL Hill, Jesse, let's get to Bill Belichick and his costume for Halloween. I love it so much.
Yeah, Bill Belichick's girlfriend, 24-year-old girlfriend, posted this photo of him catching a mermaid. He's dressed as a fisherman. He's got a pipe in his mouth, and she is a mermaid. And they did a little photo shoot where he pretended that he caught her out of the ocean, because that's what Bill Belichick is doing now, and that's what happens when you're a grandfather dating a 24-year-old. Okay? It's weird.
We are this close, guys. This close to a get ready with me with Bill Belichick. That man's skincare routine has to be so airtight right now. He's enjoying that charcoal ice cream. He's in the group chats. I love this for Bill.
Hey, listen. I guess if they're a couple, as long as they're happy, so be it.
Oh,
big age difference. But I know, Jesse, you're not into that. But I'll say, people have always said, outside of the press box or the presser after a game and the coach, that Belichick has a great personality, and he's letting it fly here.
Okay, Senior, when one of your friends starts dating an 18-year-old, get back to me, okay?
Bill Belichick, apparently game by the pound. Who knew? All right, guys, time to finish off the show and the week the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the weekend. Download, subscribe, rate, review the show. Leave it a 5-star rating. Check us out live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. And if you have to miss us live for whatever reason, because maybe you're recovering from Halloween, or you miss our great guest, thank you to ESPN college football senior writer Heather Dinich for stopping by, helping us preview the playoff picture going into next Tuesday's first rankings. This is the first time the College Football Playoff Committee will get together and give us their rankings, so bye-bye to the AP. We hope you had fun for your first 3 quarters of the season. You can check out that interview wherever you get our podcast or right here as soon as we get done on YouTube. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. We've talked a lot about Halloween fun this year. Where are you guys on this in terms of scales of enjoyment? Large crowds on big holidays are not always my bag. New Year's Eve in Times Square seems more like a threat of punishment than anything that was resemble fun. Last night in New York, we had Halloween commemorated with the Thriller Dance in 2024. I did not realize people were still doing that. But Halloween in the West Village, there was a Halloween parade in New York City, and there are what looks like hundreds of people going out and doing a flash mob style version of the Thriller Dance. Would you guys be into this?
I would absolutely be in. No, I wouldn't be into a big crowd. Like I said, New Year's Eve in New York seems like a prison sentence to me, to be shoulder to shoulder for hours on end with people. But there is nothing like a good Thriller mob flash dance to me. It's one of the scenes in 13 Going on 30 with Jennifer Gardner that I always liked in that movie, the group doing the Thriller Dance. I just think it's a great dance. It's a great dance, and it's a great dance with a big group of people. So I think it was a very, very cool moment.
It was cool to watch on the internet, but I would rather stick a fork in my eye than be present for it.
I would love to be in one of those surrounding buildings. If you had an apartment around there and you had a top-down view of this, because that's really the best way to take this in, where you could see everyone very well coordinated with this. I know and have always appreciated a good flash mob, Dad, and they crushed this.
So in your younger days, now for me it'd be a lot of years ago, but for you guys in your younger days when you went out for Halloween without watching a kid, going out as a parent, or going, Mike, to your friend's house who are parents, would you have liked to have been involved in said dance? Not just be there watching it, but be involved in the dance.
No.
Oh, I always wanted to be in a flash mob. Yes, for whatever reason, this has preoccupied me. I think it's the former theater kid in me, albeit briefly during my middle school era, had 3 solos in a play in 7th grade. Hey, what's up? Then puberty happened. The voice is gone. So whatever. But that part of me still wants to come out at certain points, and I think a flash mob is the perfect vessel for that. Jesse seems to be shocked, appalled, surprised by all of this.
I just don't know. No, I don't want to be part of it. It's not my bag.
All right. That's a fair point. We understand that. Congratulations to everybody involved. Let's move on to that, Jesse. Apparently some sort of squirrel situation in New York, too?
Yeah, so a guy who had turned a rescue squirrel into a viral sensation. The rescue squirrel has now been detained. It's been arrested. Not actually, but they took the squirrel from him. So this guy basically has this pet squirrel. He was putting it on TikTok, putting it on social media. It was going viral. Then there started to be some complaints about the fact that this guy had a squirrel, which I guess is illegal in New York to keep it as a pet. Anyway, the DEC, they raided his house without a search warrant, according to this guy, and they took the squirrel. They took also a raccoon named Fred, who had been in the home as well. So this is Peanut, as you're looking at him, spelled P-N-U-T, Peanut, and he is currently with the DEC. We don't know where, but the man who owns these pets is pleading for their safe return. But again, I do think it's illegal to own them, so he might be facing an uphill battle here.
Yeah. Mark Longo, whose house was raided, his quote was, "The DEC came to my house and raided my house without a search warrant to find a squirrel. I was treated as if I was a drug dealer and they were going for drugs and guns. The officers left with Peanut and Fred." Now, listen, again, I don't know the legalities of this. I don't know what the complaints were about, but there were multiple anonymous complaints, as you mentioned, Jesse. So I would be all for just leaving the squirrel and the raccoon in the house with the owner of the house. But I don't know the ins and outs of this. I don't know about getting bit by a squirrel or a raccoon, going through rabies. I don't know enough about this to say, oh, just let the man keep Peanut and Fred, because it seems like a cool story. But I'm not living by them, so I don't know.
Longo moved to New York in April of 23 to open the Peanuts Freedom Farm Animal Sanctuary that now houses about 300 animals, including horses, goats, alpacas. He runs the sanctuary with his wife and other family members. He is aware it's against New York state law to own a wild animal without a license, but he said he was in the process of filling out the paperwork to get Peanut certified as an education animal. Apparently, he saw Peanut's mom sadly get hit by a car, and Peanut showed up on his doorstep, couldn't live outside alone. Apparently, he had some injuries there, and so he's been an indoor squirrel ever since. I don't know. I hope there's a happy resolution to this where at the very least he can go live in the animal sanctuary, because it seems like a genuinely heartwarming story, the kind of stuff that would be like the lead-in for a Hallmark movie. Like, this guy's going to meet some girl that moves to the big city who may be the reversal of fortunes here. She moves to the big city after her small-town boyfriend has done her wrong and then meets the man who's found the animal sanctuary. We'll ignore the fact that he's married, and in the Hallmark movie he would be single doing this incredibly cute occupation, and then we can go. Hallmark writers, if you need help, call me.
Yeah, free Peanut. Free Peanut then.
Yeah,
it sounds like,
Sounds like the DEC has it in for this guy, and they're kind of keeping a wary eye on his pet sanctuary. Hopefully the paperwork gets filled out.
He said the internet apparently ratted on him. There were some people that apparently had an issue with this and called the DEC on him and got them to raid him. So I want to do more research into this situation. On the surface, it sounds pretty freaking cute. And in the scale, on the scale of things that are probably happening illegally in New York City, feels like the dude that's got a squirrel as a pet is probably pretty far down on that list.
Yeah, very far down. He's also in rural New York, like he's near the Pennsylvania border. So like, he's not even in New York City. So we're okay. He should let him have the squirrel.
Christ, then what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
What are we even having a conversation about?
Free Peanut.
Free Peanut. Apparently, Jesse, you know what? Let's get to the third. Apparently, free the elephants in the Colorado Zoo as well.
Yeah, so a non-human rights group is what they call themselves, is trying to get elephants' rights to sue for their freedom. So a high court in Colorado has to decide if they're going to allow the elephants to be identified as persons. But guys, the moral of this story is this, and I'm so angry about this. We gotta stop taking animals and putting them in zoos that are meant to be like roaming free. Zoos suck, honestly. We gotta get rid of the frickin' zoos. Like, it's not cool to be doing this.
I'm with you. These elephants, Missy, Kimba, Lucky, Lulu, and Jambo.
Great names.
What is the group? The Non-Human Rights Project says the elephants should be free, basically, that they're born in the wild in Africa and they're showing signs of brain damage because the zoo is essentially a prison for such intelligent and social creatures. So they're trying to get the animals released to one of the 2 accredited elephant sanctuaries in the United States. I'm all for that. Jesse, I agree with you. While taking my grandkids to a zoo to see the animals is a cool thing, as an adult, looking at these animals in a cage just kind of laying around really bums me out. I would love to see them more in their natural habitat.
We should just reverse this. Zoos, we're done with you. You should go out of business. We should just have animal sanctuaries, and then you put humans in the little caged car things, and you drive out in the trailers, and you can go see the animals in their natural habitat. We got to stop taking massive animals, whales, stop putting them in bathtubs, essentially.
Yeah.
Guys, we're missing the real opportunity here. They want the elephants to be able to sue for their own freedom. Forget kangaroo court. We could have elephant court soon. And who's the defense attorney that's going to go out there and try and argue with an actual elephant if they're led into the courtroom? That's what I need to see. Forget zoos, forget everything else. I need elephant court. I need these guys on trial representing themselves, trying to fight their way to freedom. That's another movie. I'm just pitching ideas here today. If y'all want them, they're here. Free game, could be paid for. At the very least, you could download, subscribe, rate, review our show, and leave it a 5-star rating as payment. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you guys on Monday.